And here we are again. The art of the Christmas ident, and indeed the art of the ident, as we used to know it, continues to slide towards obsolescence. Or if you prefer a more positive spin, redefinition. As channels are replaced with pick-and-mix services and schedules become more and more irrelevant, it's not as if those services aren't going to need to keep identifying themselves to the viewer. It's just the days of structured broadcasting and now and next, and symbols in between the programmes with polite announcements are coming to an end. With the exception of live events, people will be watching whatever they want, whenever they want, with no two households reading from the same programme menu. The presentation system we know and love, trailers, menus, programme slides, and even the idents themselves, were all created for, based around, and assume and require the existence of a structured, immutable schedule of programming that's simply out of date in this day and age. Once us millennials are out of the way, the last generation to really grow up with that kind of a system, whatever remains of it will probably soon follow. Because we'll probably have bigger problems by then, but still, at least one channel still brings out new Christmas idents every year, and that's BBC1. This year they stuck with the tradition of making little vignettes based on whatever the marquee family programming is for Christmas Day. Unfortunately, that just happens to be Wallace and Gromit. Wallace and Gromit were of course the stars of the first explicitly programme-related Christmas presentation back in 1995 on BBC2 to promote A Close Shave. This year of course is Vengeance Most Foul, their second feature-length production, with pride of place at mince pie time on Christmas Day. And so inevitably Aardman have been hired to provide some amusing backdrops to the BBC One logo, starring our heroes alongside the new character Norbot the Gnome, who, although he doesn't speak here, will be voiced by Reece Shearsmith and has nothing to do with Asda. And they're obviously very lovely. You'd have to be some kind of monstrous psychopath to have a bad word to say about any of it. They're still starting them too early though. Obviously the old tradition of showing them from Christmas Eve through to about the 27th belongs to that old obsolete system that I was talking about earlier, when they had the room, the scope and the context to build up some sort of anticipation about it. With trailer stings no longer a thing, that's not really possible. So starting a little earlier makes sense. And of course I still approve of keeping them on until New Year is over. That should have been a thing back in the day as well. But all the way through December from the very start of the month. There's a reason some advent calendars only give you a little sliver of chocolate every day until giving you a big slab on Christmas Eve. If you go full on for 3.5 weeks before the event itself, it kind of undermines the event itself. To make matters worse, the policy is actually the Saturday closest to the first, which means that this year, for the second time ever, the BBC Christmas ident started in November. That's just not something that should happen. If you want the bottom line on these idents, well, I can't deny I would prefer something more original and creative and maybe even abstract and not related to a programme that's on over the season. But, come on, Wallace and Gromit. They weren't not going to do it. It's almost a tradition in itself for them to have the ident every time there's a new one out. We would have complained if they hadn't done it. And inevitably it's done exceptionally well. Elsewhere it's a case of as you were. BBC Two are still using the cattail and the tinsel and the tree and the hey-hey. ITV1 are reusing all those highly memorable whatever things that they've done the past couple of years that everyone loves so much. To be fair, they might as well, because Coronation Street and Emmerdale aside, no sod's likely to be watching this Christmas. Much like last Christmas, and the one before that. They've had worse Christmas schedules, but few that seemed quite so much like they'd given up. When I predicted last year that Channel 4 would reuse the idents they'd newly created then, this year, I wasn't exactly sticking my neck out, and indeed they have. They are still very good, and remember in the current post-schedule era of presentation, there is very little reason not to. Channel 5 have of course done the same, but this should be the last year we see these, because their owners Paramount have promised a refresh in the new year, currently scheduled for some point in the spring. No idea what it'll look like yet, or whether it will keep the traditional symbol in the foreground aesthetic that only Channel 5 and Channel 4 are really keeping up these days. I would be astonished if it did. One thing we do know, they're dropping the word channel again and going back to just being called 5, although apparently it's a numeral rather than a word this time. The agency charged with relaunching it is Pablo of London, previously responsible for the extremely modern new look of Flora Margarine, the no less modern Gen Z baiting Clipper T, and this madness for DFS. So whatever they do for Channel 5, I'm assuming I will neither like nor understand it. It's hard being a 40-something. It's not all repetition this year though, and preventing BBC1 from winning by default, we turn to Wales. I wasn't expecting much from S4C, to be honest, after last year's Rooftops of Pontypridd turned out to be a repeat of a repeat. But I've actually made an effort this year with this lovely, quasi-cel-shaded saga of a little Welsh girl and her dragon friend.
Noswaith dda a chroeso, trefniadau I alaru ac I ddathlu sy'n hollti ac yn uno yn rownd a rownd, ar ôl y clwb rygbi gyda sylwebeth Saesneg ar y botwm coch. English language commentary is available now on the red button.
On one level, it's just nice to see a dragon on S4C again, even if that increasingly plain logo gets less inspiring every year. Whether these are better or whether they beat BBC1's offering, I don't know. I'm happy to call this year a draw. I will now pause for a couple of seconds for you to guess what's on the Radio Times cover this year. Just kidding though, I won't. What do you think's on the cover? Yes, obviously a complete no-brainer. The same basic principle applies as with the BBC1 ident. Although there was a year the Radio Times put Wallace and Gromit on the cover out of sheer desperation. But we don't like to talk about that. At least it's not Robin Shaw again. I mean, he's a talented man, but there's other songs to sing. Mind you, I am getting sick of the blue snowy backdrops and that exact same Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year copy on the front. Oh, and the usual objectionable line about being legendary is present and correct, and voiced by Wallace no less, but it is in very small print in the corner. Maybe they're finally getting embarrassed by it. I still worry about the magazine's future, of course, with the price of a regular issue finally rising this year to £5, which makes this year's double issue something of a bargain, relatively speaking, at just £1 more. It is still the best there is, especially at Christmas, if you can afford it. TV Times have kept the faith with yet another lovingly rendered picture of Mr. K. Kringle, who is apparently hallucinating from overwork. See his hand in mid-swat there. I like the sparkling jewelled effect on the logo, and it seems very TV Times for some reason. I don't know who the artist is, because TV Times barely has any kind of online presence at all anymore, but I suspect it's Richard Johnson, returning from last year. And then the RTE guide has hired a wee girl from Offaly named Shannon Bergen, who's produced this lovely toy shop tableau, picked out in pastel shades of lilac, orange and yellow. Radio Times take note, these things can come in colours other than blue. Notable by its absence is the phrase, Christmas begins with the RTE guide, for the first time in God knows how long. No idea why, or if it matters, but there it is. At this point, I'd just like to pay a quick tribute to some people we lost this year. And by this year, I mean one after the other in the last few months. Specifically Oliver Ashmole Day, one of the most extensive VHS archivers on YouTube. And Roy Clark of Put the Telly On, from back in the early days of internet-based TV nostalgia. And also Terence Burridge of TV Whirl, who recently posted what amounts to a farewell message on his website, indicating his own cancer story is approaching the epilogue. All three have provided great services for the preservation of ephemera throughout nearly 25 years in TV Whirl's case. I've always thought that to know where we are and where we've been, it's important to remember the small things, the otherwise unimportant things, like adverts and trends in visual aesthetics. People like Oliver and Terence and Rory have made great contributions towards that cause. Greater than me, all I do is comment on them. They and people like them are the ones who preserve them. Thank you. And Terence, if you are watching, pass the message along. So as not to end on a depressing note, let's see what goodies we've managed to scrape from the archives this year. What you're looking at now is a rather cute festive VT clock for Crossroads, which showed up, along with a whole bunch of the adverts, in the deranged box set of the entire series, which killed network DVD. Personally, I don't think it was worth it. And I can't remember if I've done this one already, but it's cool enough to be seen twice. Some fairly high quality footage of the glam rock BBC1 Christmas ident from 1976. Bit late for glam rock, but never mind.
On BBC Two, it's time to wave your Gladys and greet once again Australia's First Lady, housewife, superstar, Dame Edna Everage in The Barry Humphries Show.
You leave my Gladys out of this. Next we got some LWT business from 1994, so festively overloaded that it compels the announcer to introduce the news like it's a sermon from the Mount.
Now, Alistair Stewart and Fiona Foster with the news of the LWT area in London tonight.
Of course, if Alistair Stewart had delivered the Sermon on the Mount, I doubt if Christianity would have caught on. Next, something from the rather sad British answer to MTV, Music Box, as seen late at night on Yorkshire television until they decided Job Finder was more interesting. It hardly needs saying that this is from 1986, before CGI could really do snowman. Everything was just too smooth and solid in those days. It doesn't help that they decided to give this snowman limbs instead of just making him two spheres on top of each other. He just looks like he's made of stationery supplies, with a big old rubber for a body. Mustn't forget Hogmanay, and in 1991 BBC Scotland had a very industrious ident that also doubled as the titles for their Hogmanay programme, in typically efficient, cost-effective Scottish fashion.
Now, to take us through midnight, we join Cathy MacDonald, Phil Cunningham and a host of friends for Hogmanay Live. This programme is in stereo where available and on Radio Scotland in stereo on 92 to 95 FM.
Good evening everyone and welcome to Hogmanay Live. We've got a fabulous lineup of musicians inside waiting to take you into 92.
And finally, though it would much rather be forgotten, please enjoy in full this little festive slice of the most arse-minded channel relaunch in ITV's history.
Happy Christmas!
Have a fabulous Christmas and a really happy New Year.
I'd like to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year.
Merry Christmas. Have a great time.
Have a very Merry Christmas.
And a Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas and have a great time.
Have a really happy Christmas! Happy New Year!
Have a great Christmas.
Yep, have a very happy Christmas.
And the best of season's greetings to you.
Yes, a very Merry Christmas to you from everyone here at Channel 3 North East.
And that's it for another year. There's my usual shout-outs to Stuart Kenny for the archive stuff and for generally helping out over the year. Ed Beatty Jr. for helping out with my Patreon duties. All my patrons, in fact, for helping me through a bloody depressing year with very little hope of improvement, unfortunately. And a special shout-out to Chris Oakley for making the title sequence, as he has for the past several years, occasionally breaking the bounds of possibility and common sense in doing so. Honestly, some of these I wouldn't even know where to start. Which means you've got him to thank for Christmas wrapping looking halfway decent for the past several years. So thank you for watching, thank you for continuing to watch. The hard sale will be back in January, and there may even be something for the 70th anniversary of ITV. That's not a promise, but we'll see. And whatever it is, it won't be another complete remake of ITV in the face. Unless ITV themselves ask me for one. Have an absolutely bacchanalian Christmas and New Year. Every Christmas is last Christmas. Eat a mince pie. I'm out.
GR 9830, Crossroads episode 3546, part 1, take 1, and a Merry Christmas.